Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Roadmaster front sway bar on a 2008 Freightliner XC chassis. Now this is what your front sway bar replacement is going to look like when it's installed. And it does use the factory mounting points, so it is a relatively easy installation. You don't have to raise up your vehicle, and that's the great part of it is you can upgrade your suspension, and it's going to be something that you're going to notice every time you make a turn, every time that you have a long sweeping on-ramp. You're going to feel that sway bar really fighting against the other side, holding your vehicle at a nice level ground. It's also just going to give you a better steering feel, better traction, and overall more confidence when you're driving your vehicle. Now we've actually taken this out on our test course with the previous front sway bar on, and we've also driven it after, and I'm here to tell you it is a quick and noticeable difference. And again, this is one of those things that when you upgrade, you're going to be happy every time you drive it, knowing that you're going to just have a better all-over experience while driving your RV. We have the sway bars side by side, and you can see the Roadmaster is a little bit thicker. It's also made out of 4140 chromoly steel, so that rigidity is actually going to be felt through the bar as the suspension sways from one side to the other. So having that rigidity is definitely going to be the difference between our original sway bar and our new one. Let's go ahead and actually get a measurement here just to see how much difference we actually have. So this one's coming in at 1.5 inches. And our Roadmaster here is going to be 1.7 inches. So already quite a bit of difference, but again, it's going to come down to the actual makeup of the metal. That's where you're going to see that rigidity. Now something else that you're going to notice is going to be a little bit different is the actual shackles here that hold our sway bars on. This is our factory one, which is just kind of rubber, and it's gotten distorted over time. It's kind of seen better days, and this is going to be a urethane, so it's also going to be just, it's going to hold up over time, but it also has a smoother feel to it. It's going to make this a little bit smoother as it actually does the swaying motion through this portion. So right now we have our existing front sway bar on there, and we're going to hit some bumps as well as do some evasive maneuvering just to kind of see what it's like before. And that's the thing, having a factory front sway bar, generally it should help quite a bit, but moving to a thicker one, it's going to fight that sway quite a bit and really plant the front of the vehicle down quite a bit more. So it's going to reduce that body roll. It's going to just give you an overall better handling experience, and it's going to feel more sure-footed, and also your turns should get a little bit more precise, a little bit more agile, and a little bit just, again, more comforting while driving. So let's go ahead, we'll hit some bumps and see what it's like. So kind of doing some side-to-side ones here pretty quickly. It does seem okay enough. It kind of bounces a little bit back and forth, and that's kind of to be expected as the suspension is still doing its job. But really when you're going to notice it is making those long sweeping turns, especially like on a roundabout or a long on-ramp, something along those lines where the vehicle's really just kind of feeling that weight tug. That's where the sway bar is going to come into play, because it's going to fight that back and kind of balance itself out. So just making some quick turns here. Try to find a good spot here in our parking lot. So a lot of times you'll notice like the steering will be a little bit numb, and that's where that sway bar, when you move to one side, it's going to kind of fight back and really plant that tire that's on the inside edge, and that's where you're going to get your traction. So that's where you get that sure-footedness of that thicker sway bar. It's just going to be a little bit more responsive. And right now, just kind of weaving side to side here, you do have that body roll and just a little bit of a hesitation in the steering. It takes quite a bit of rotation to kind of get that turn initiated. So hopefully this thicker bar will definitely make a big difference in giving the steering feel back. So here, as I'm making kind of a large loop. So now let's head back into the shop. We'll get our new sway bar on and replace this old one and see the difference. So now back on our test course, we have our new front sway bar installed, and we're going to see the difference. We're going to hit some of the bumps again, and I do tend to feel that it does settle out a little bit better overall with a front sway bar upgrade. But really the difference you're going to notice is when you do the slalom, and you're going to notice that body roll really kind of come back down, and also that steering feel is going to get quite a bit better. So over our bumps, the front does seem like it's not affecting it as much, which is good. So we'll go out and do some slalom. So just doing some quick steering here. Immediately I noticed that I'm getting a lot more initial feedback from the front end. It just feels more planted. So instead of kind of throwing the steering wheel around and having the RV toss you around, you're a little more in control. It just feels a lot more planted, a lot more sure-footed, and overall it just has a lot better feel driving, a lot more confidence inspiring. Overall, the installation's pretty easy. There's minimal tools required, and really, if you have a creeper, this is going to be pretty easy to do on flat level ground. So speaking of that install, let's take a look at it now so you can get your front sway bar installed. We're going to begin our installation by actually removing our original sway bar, and a lot of times these see a lot of road grime and kind of just build up over time. So I suggest taking a penetrating oil and soaking down each of the hardware nuts. That way it's going to make it a lot easier to take this off. Now we're going to be doing this on a lift. This is something you can actually do in your driveway or in your garage. We're just doing it on a lift to make it a little bit easier for you all to see. So let's go ahead and begin again soaking these down. So you'll have your end links that mount up to the frame that run down to the actual sway bar, and then you have your actual brackets here that we'll need to also soak down. So we're going to begin by starting at the top end link mount that goes on the frame. Now these are going to be 9/16, so let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and get these loosened up and get these removed. Now it is kind of tricky here, so getting any kind of impact or anything like that up here is going to be kind of tricky just because of the space here. So I'm just using the ratcheting wrench, and that should get us kind of close to where we need to be at least. So we'll go ahead, get this off, and we'll repeat the same process on the other side. Now if you're rotating this, your end link may start spinning on you, and that's going to make it pretty tough to actually get that off. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a set of vice grips here, since we are replacing the end links, and I'm just going to use that to kind of hold on to it as I loosen up that nut on the top. Now if you're having trouble, that top one is kind of tricky. What I'm going to actually do is use my vice grips to kind of rotate the shaft, and that's going to, I have my wrench up top. That should help get this loosened up a little bit easier. So with my wrench up there, I'm able to kind of spin my vice grips here. You might be able to get a small socket, just a shallow well one up there, and have some luck, but it is pretty tight up there, so this is another option that will work. So now we have this off, and we'll just go ahead and repeat on the other side. So the top one was actually a little bit easier on this side, but we'll still need to get the bottom one off. And as you can see, if I try to loosen it, you're gonna have that end link spinning around. So again, you can just take a set of vice grips here, bite onto it, and we should be able to get this off pretty easily. So once you have both sides loosened up, you should be able to take your sway bar and kind of just pull this out of the way, just like that, depending on your ground clearance, and you should be able to get your end links out. It's going to make it a little bit easier when you go to remove your actual sway bar. So we can take these parts and set them aside. So now we'll need to remove the sway bar at the bushings, and it's going to be 9/16 as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely remove one. I'm going to leave one slightly loose just to support it while we work on the other side. That way we don't have one side hanging down, as this sway bar is pretty heavy. We have that one out, and I'll just make this one loose here, but still holding on to a few threads. So now we can work on the other side and get those removed. So now I have this side kind of supported here. I can just simply loosen this other side just by my hands. We should be able to get this out. So now we can take that one that we left a few threads on and support your sway bar. That way it doesn't fall on you. And that way you'll have a wrench on top and your impact. That way they're not spinning around. So now we have our sway bar removed. So now we're going to need to get our end link installed onto our frame first, and we're going to want to take a look at the orientation here. So here we have a cup washer, we have a little rubber bushing here, same right there, and another cup washer, and then finally with our nut. Now this is going to be an 11/16, so you're going to want to grab a nice socket for that. I suggest a deep well as well, because as you tighten this down, you're going to want to make sure that that socket can fit on there. So we'll just go ahead, make sure we keep the same orientation here. We'll slide this into place, sliding our bushing and our cup washer there. And finally, we'll follow it up with our nut. Now, something that's nice from a difference from our factory one is the fact that the shaft on the end link actually has a slot here, and that's going to allow us to put our 9/16 wrench here, and that's going to kind of hold that in place as we tighten the top. Now, getting a deep well socket on top is going to be kind of tricky depending on the plumbing of how yours is actually ran. The passenger side should be a little bit more friendly for getting that deep well in. You may need a ratcheting wrench. That's going to make it a lot easier. So if you need to go ahead and grab that 11/16 ratcheting wrench for this, don't be surprised if that's the case. So now with my 9/16 on the actual end link in that slotted section, I have my ratcheting wrench here. And so if we can, we're going to try to get this wrench in a nice position to where it's going to kind of hold this for us. So we might be able to get lucky here on our actual trailing arm. So let's give it a shot. So you can see I've actually wedged my wrench here kind of right on this bracket, and hopefully just with a little holding pressure here, that's going to allow me to tighten this up. It's a little tricky, but we are making progress, so we'll just go ahead and get this tightened down. Once you really get to the point where it seems tightened down, it's going to bottom out at this point because the shaft actually has this groove. So just go until it's pretty much you can't tighten it down. You don't have to get too crazy because that will bottom out. So you'll know you're at the right spot. So go ahead and repeat on the other side. And you're going to know that it's tight because these urethane bushings are going to start to kind of bulge out. You will have a little bit of play just with that urethane moving around, but that's normal because it actually gives it a little bit of extra flex. That way it's not rigidly mounted to the chassis. So now we're going to get ready to put our actual sway bar up on our end links, and so we're going to need to remove just the bottom portion of our hardware. Now I'd slide up your bushing and your cup washer here. That way it's going to be in place. You're not going to have to fight that. It should stay up decently just with a little bit of tension. So we'll go ahead and remove this. We're going to need to have this handy in this orientation to put it back up. So we'll do one side and then the other. So just kind of raising this up in place. You may need to support the other side. So if you have an extra set of hands, that might be helpful. So first we'll put our urethane bushing. You can see that kind of raised portion. That's going to sit inside the gap between the actual stud here and the sway bar. So you can see it kind of goes in there nicely. We'll put our cup spacer there, making sure that we actually have that facing towards the sway bar, and then we'll follow it up with a nut. Now we're going to leave this loose, and that way we have some adjustability when we actually mount our brackets up. So go ahead and get one side up, and then when you get the other, or you can actually go to the other side and get that hand tightened on as well. So now we have both of them, the sway bar actually suspended on both of the end links. So now you're going to want to grab your bracket, your urethane bushing, the grease that comes in the kit, as well as the factory hardware that we removed from our brackets here. And then we can actually just take this urethane bushing And we're gonna grease this up. This is gonna allow that sway bar to move in here without binding or becoming hard. It's just gonna kind of allow things to move nice and smooth. We'll get a smoother anti-sway effect. So just take a little bit here and rub it on the inside. Now I recommend some nitrile gloves here because this is kind of nasty stuff. So just kind of keep your hands clean, make sure it doesn't get on your skin. So we'll go ahead, coat the whole inside. And then I'll just simply slide this over. Then we'll take our bracket here, and this is just gonna slide over it like that. It's gonna be maybe just a little tight, but not too bad. And then what we'll do with our hardware that we took off is make sure we have it in the proper orientation here, but we're gonna go ahead and just kind of raise our sway bar in place. And we're gonna try to get this lined up here, at least on one of them. And then follow it up with the washer, and then also put the nut up top. Now before I put the rear hardware on, I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, just getting our front hole lined up and hand threaded on. Now in order to get your bolt to kind of line up, you may have to kind of raise the sway bar. The good thing is this is slotted, so it allows for a nice little angle here, but it should cinch up once we get our back ones in. So let's finish this one up. So now we have our sway bar fully supported. And now we can go back and kind of just push this back part of the bracket up, and that's gonna allow us to get the rest of our hardware in. All right, so now we'll just follow this back up with our washer and our nut. And if you're having trouble getting this to align, you might want to take a floor jack and kind of just raise up on this. That'll take some of that pressure off and make it a lot easier. So now we'll go ahead and we're going to start with our brackets here. So we have our 9/16. We're going to want to tighten on the bolt side. So I'm going to go with my impact and then have my wrench down here just to make sure that it's not spinning around. So now we're going to go back and we're going to tighten up our brackets first. And so with my 9/16 wrench, I'm going to put that on the bolt, and then at the top I'm going to have my ratchet, so we'll be tightening the nut down. So let's go ahead, we'll get all these tightened down. Now I did not see a torque setting in the instruction manual, so we're going to go until we are snug here. And I'm going to actually go to my back one, and that way we can kind of even out. That way we're not maxing one out and binding the back. So if you need to, you can go ahead and alternate. While tightening these, it might actually be a good time to make sure that this is aligned with your cross member to where it's parallel. If you are tight on one side, that's going to cause the suspension to kind of bind up a little bit and really kind of give you not the most anti-sway as it's balanced between the two. So if you need to align it, there are slots on these brackets. A dead blow hammer kind of hitting it in or adjusting as necessary to make sure it's parallel is going to be worth doing. So now we'll tighten up our end links here, and we're gonna wanna make sure that they are snug. You're gonna have a little bit of squish here, but don't overdo it. And you are gonna wanna make sure that you put your wrench on the actual end link just so it's not spinning around. So with that little bit of tension there, you can see they started to push out, but they're not overdone. That should be just about right. So now with those tightened down, that's pretty much the install of the sway bar. Now you are going to want to drive it around and allow it to kind of loosen up, and then come back and double check it to make sure nothing's loosened up too much. It's also going to allow that suspension to kind of settle out. So it is something you want to keep an eye on when you do routine maintenance. Just double check that everything's actually holding in place tight. And that was a look and installation of the Roadmaster front sway bar on a 2008 Freightliner XC chassis.